How you all doing, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 6 4 key game picks. Before we get into week number 6, wow, I must say Week 5 was a little insane. I know a lot of media pundits, like the 4-letter network, which I don't want to speak of, or the 3-letter, or NFL network, or anything like that. Everybody kept saying this was probably the craziest NFL Sunday in a long time and all. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was one of the greatest NFL Sundays in the regular season and all that. There have been some wild NFL weeks in past years, but this one was a little bit crazy and all that when I think about it. From what has happened around, a very quick NFL whip, the Vikings and the Chiefs are still undefeated, and a lot of people are saying, is this a Super Bowl preview with both of them being undefeated and the way they're playing right now? I wouldn't necessarily say that this might be a preview of the Super Bowl for both these two teams, but no. Minnesota barely beat the Jets, even though despite the fact Aaron Rodgers threw 2 interceptions. But the Jets almost came back and tied the game in London, but luckily Minnesota's defense actually made a play and put a stop to that last drive of the Jets. And the only reason why the Chiefs still remain undefeated, they played a Saints team that was pretty banged up. They were injured, and obviously the Saints got even bigger, has a bigger injury now in terms of Derek Carr got hurt against the Chiefs. Now it's a bigger question of whether or not he's going to play next week in a crucial divisional game against the Bucs, basically round 2 of that series. So I don't know what the Saints will do now that when they started on a roll and now they've stumbled, and it could get things could get out of hand and worse for the Saints if they don't find a way to regroup and do something. Other games that went on. Obviously, the 2 best games of the weekend were definitely the Bills, Texans, and the Ravens and Bengals. Now, speaking of that Bills-Texans game, it looked like the Texans had total control of that game, and then their defense almost choked the game away. When it looked to me that Buffalo looked like they could have a chance of taking this game into overtime, because late in the game, the Bills had the ball with like about a minute left, but they were pinned deep. And a lot of people, including me, head scratching is, why were you passing when you really needed to run the ball and more likely just run out the clock? The game was tied at 20-20 at that point. The Bills didn't waste any time. That was a big blunder. I don't know what Sean McDermott was thinking, but obviously the Bills really screwed up on the clock management, and they ended up losing that game to the Texans on a last-second field goal. But when I talk about the other game, Bengals and the Ravens, that game was insane. A back-and-forth shootout. You couldn't ask for a lot from Joe Burrow and that Bengals team. That basically he played his butt off in that game. He was almost perfect until he threw a late interception in the 4th quarter. And then the Bengals had numerous chances to win that game, and they couldn't capitalize on the turnovers that Baltimore created. But the Ravens got the job done, and now they're starting to get the groove on, and they now could start looking more and more dangerous down the road ahead. When I look at other key games, well, a couple of head scratchers. What has happened to the 49ers? I know they're still dealing with some injuries and all. Obviously, they don't have McCaffrey. Who knows how long he's going to be out. That's really hurting them in the running game. But another 4th quarter lead, and they choked it away. You got to wonder now if the defending NFC championships now is starting to look like they could be in serious trouble down the road, because their schedule does not get any easier from here for the 49ers. Seahawks lost total, starting to look like they might lose control of the NFC West. The 49ers should be considered lucky that the Seahawks flat out laid an egg against the Giants at home. And you got to wonder now with this team, who's going to have control of that division? Who's going to look? The NFC West has been pretty dominant in the last 6 years, obviously due to the fact that the 49ers have dominated the division, and then at one point the Rams won the division and they ended up winning the Super Bowl 4 years ago. There's a lot of things that went on in week number 6, in week number 5, I should say, as we get into week number 6. Let's get into week 6, shall we? All right, let's begin with key game number 1, and obviously talking about the Seahawks and the 49ers. It's first place showdown in the NFC West, and it's the Thursday night game. It is the 49ers versus the Seahawks. The 49ers are a slight 3.5-point favorite, and expect that number to get much lower, for sure, before kickoff. Current lines have them at 3.5. I think that number is going to go down to 3, maybe 2.5. Brock Purdy was 19 of 35, 244 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He got picked off twice against that Arizona defense, which in all honesty, Arizona's defense wasn't really that dominant in that game until the 49ers started basically stumbling in the second half of that game. On the other side, Geno Smith, 28 of 40, 284 yards, 1 touchdown. He had no interceptions in that game, but obviously special teams let the Seahawks down in that game when they could have tied it, and then the Giants blocked a field goal, and they ended up scoring a touchdown from there, and they ended up winning. First place is definitely on the line between these two teams. And when I look at this football game here, which team's going to show up? Because both these two teams are struggling, and the NFC West is really not that great of a division as it once was. It's really come to a point now. Who makes the big plays in this game? Obviously, both teams are dealing with injuries. And who's gonna step up in this football game? Well, Geno Smith and his mobility can carry that Seahawks offense against a 49er defense that's struggling. And what about the 49ers? Can Deebo Samuel and Kittle, can somebody make plays on that football team? Or maybe something's really wrong with Purdy. See, this is a head scratcher when I think about this football game here. Both offenses are struggling, and they didn't play all that well in their last games in week 5. Now you got to wonder who will take command of this game, and especially who will have first place in this game. The 49ers have been the only team that's been able in the division that's been able to beat the Seahawks in Seattle. Because Seattle is notorious with that outdoor stadium they have for noise and everything. But if Geno Smith's offense is really struggling and that 49er defense can find a way to get to Geno Smith in this football game, I like the 49ers' chances in this game, even though despite the fact the 49ers are struggling too. It's a tough pick. This is a 50-50 toss-up in this game for who takes first place in this one here. But I'm going to give it to the 49ers. I think the 49ers will barely squeak out a victory against the Seahawks in a game that both these two teams need to have. And this is for first place in the division. And this is for first place right now in the NFC West in this early in the season. I think the 49ers slightly have the better offense than the Seahawks do, but obviously they're missing McCaffrey. That running game is taking a hit. So I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair in this one here. I think this is going to be an offensive struggle between both these two teams, given the fact that they've struggled in Week 5. But I like the 49ers a little bit more in this game. I think they'll get the job done. It's going to be a low-scoring game. It'll be like a 17-14 type of game. I just think that's going to be a low-scoring game. But I like the 49ers a little bit more in this game here. Seattle's offense is really struggling, and their defense really did not do a good job against a giant offense that basically is almost below average, and you lose to Daniel Jones of all people. I think the 49ers will beat the Seahawks in this one. Take the 49ers at 3.5 here. I like the 49ers over the Seahawks. Key game number 2. An interesting matchup here in this one here. The Commanders versus the Ravens. Now, this has been the first time in a long time that I put Washington in a 4-key game pick. Because given the fact that Jaden Daniels, this sensation, has been unbelievable. And not only that, he's got playmakers. He's got Austin Eckler, who was a former Charger, which I miss him badly on that team. And they actually have a competent coaching staff. Dan Quinn has done a fantastic job for that team. Look at Jaden Daniels' stats from last week. 14 of 25, 238 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And in his first year as QB, he's got this Commanders team currently right now in command of that division. Now, obviously, in the NFC East division. But obviously, somewhere down the line, I want to see what he can do against the Cowboys, because the Cowboys and the Eagles are not that far behind, because as they start to begin division play in the NFC East. Now, on the other side, the Ravens barely beating the Bengals in overtime. Lamar Jackson, 26 of 42, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Possibly one of Lamar Jackson's best games he's had all season. But obviously, you got to give more credit to Derrick Henry, too, in that running game. The Ravens are a 6.5-point favorite. I would say that's about right. I don't think that number is going to change all that much, because now this is where I want to see what Jaden Daniels and that Washington Commander offense can. I think this game's going to be a shootout. This game will be another shootout here. The Ravens defense is struggling to stop big plays. And if Jaden Daniels can make some big plays in this football game, this could be a back and forth affair like it was between the Ravens and Joe Burrow against the Bengals. But here's the thing. The Ravens are a little bit more of an experienced team, even though both teams are young. And Lamar Jackson is on a mission. And their offense is finally getting on a groove, and they're finally over 500, and they're getting that running game going. And I think this is where the Commanders are going to hit a brick wall in this game. They got to find a way to stop Derrick Henry in that running game, because Derrick Henry now is starting to get on a groove. And if they get that running game going, it eases off the pressure of Lamar Jackson here. I like the Ravens in this game. I think this game will be a shootout for sure, but obviously the takeaways are going to be important in this game. Which defense makes turnovers? Creates the turnovers. I'm picking the Ravens in this game. I think they're the more experienced team here. It should be a fun game. I think this game will be a shootout for sure. I want to see between two young, good quarterbacks. Let's see. You have the rookie versus the teacher and see, because both these quarterbacks are mobile. They can create plays. But I just think, to me, the Ravens are the better team in this one here. It should be a fun game on Sunday. But I like the Ravens at -6.5. I think the Ravens will beat the Commanders. Key game number 3, the Monday night game, and a showdown for first place in the AFC East, for no question for sure. It is the Bills versus the Jets. Yes, you said that right. Somehow the Jets, at a record of 2-3, are still have a possibility of getting into first place. Josh Allen was 9 of 30. This is definitely one of his worst games he's had in years. 131 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interception. Aaron Rodgers didn't have that much of a good game either. 29 of 54, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. The Bills are a slight favorite at 2.5, and I expect that number to get a little bit lower. Maybe 2, maybe 1.5. Question mounts for both these two teams. Both these two teams are in need of a win for sure. And somebody has to take command of an AFC East that really looked like it was going to be the best division in football. Now it's starting to become one of the worst divisions in football, given the record on everybody in that division. This is what it boils down to the point here. Now, the Jets defense has kept the Jets in football games the last few weeks, but somehow their offense has struggled. And the Bills' offense is starting to struggle big time too. I mean, this is a 50-50 toss-up here. This is a key game because this is basically a tie for first place. Now I gotta wonder which team is gonna show up here, especially on primetime. Now, there's a lot. I'm sure that Aaron Rodgers don't want to have flashbacks of last season, given the fact that, remember what happened? Obviously, everybody remembers what happened last year with the Achilles in that game against the Bills in the first week of last year. It is a tough pick here because I don't know which offense is going to show up here, but this is a showdown for basically a tie for first place, like it is with San Francisco and Seattle. You can't go wrong with this game. It's a tough pick here, but I just think, to me, that the Bills' offense is a tad better than the Jets, even though the Jets might have a defense here. But unless if the Jets can get their offense rolling, I like the Bills in this game. It's going to be low scoring. This is another game I could see being a low scoring game, maybe a 13-9 football game, or maybe a 14-10 game, because the Jets defense has really kept them in football games, but yet their offense just can't get the job done. And the Bills can explode at any time. This is not the Bills of last year when they struggled in the first half of the season. And obviously, Josh Allen and the Bills are trying to find ways to win football games here, and I expect the Bills to answer the Jets here because they know first place is at stake this early in the season. And I'm picking the Bills as a slight favorite in this one here, and I'm going to pick them as my pick in this one here at -2.5. Because if the Jets' offense continues to struggle, I like the Bills in this game because the Bills' offense can explode at any time. And I could see that happening in this game if the Jets can't muster any touchdowns. I'm going to pick the Bills as a slight favorite in this one. And it's a 50-50 toss-up. You don't know who's going to win this football game here. I like the Bills over the Jets. And finally, key game number 4, the Detroit Lions against the Dallas Cowboys. Remember what happened last year. Any Lions fans not forgetting about what happened last year where the refs screwed them in that game against Dallas late in the season last year. And you don't think that the Lions want some measure of revenge going into this one here. Now, the Lions were on their bye week last week, and these are week 4 stats of Jared Goff against Seattle. Jared Goff was a perfect 18 of 18, 292 yards and 2 touchdowns, no picks. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys barely beat the Steelers last week. He was 29 of 42, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. This is going to boil down to the point here. if the Cowboys offense can finally get off into a groove finally. Because this Detroit Lion team, even though they have some injuries up front still, this Detroit Lion offense can explode at any time. And I gotta wonder if the Cowboys defense is going to be ready for any explosive plays. And they've really struggled against the run. And you know, with Montgomery and Gibbs for the Lions, they could get that running game going in an instant. And that, to me, is a key point for the Lions to beat the Cowboys here. The Cowboys defense is going to have to find a way to stop the run here and find a way to stop Jared Goff from making big plays, because the Cowboys offense and Prescott, they are really struggling. They can't. Ezekiel Elliott, with the second go around with the Cowboys, has really been a disaster. His stats, his running yardage has been down big time. He's not the same player he once was. And you got to wonder now. I think, to me, this is kind of a revenge game for the Lions, and obviously the Cowboys need this game more than they do. But when I look at this football game here, I just like Detroit, and I just like the Lions offense and what they've done in the last few weeks. And if they get it going in this game, I like the Lions in this game. I think they're going to get some measure of revenge in this one here. I'm picking the Detroit Lions here. I think that offense, that Jared Goff, and you got that running game with Montgomery and Gibbs. I know defense-wise, they really are missing some key players on that defensive side. But I think, to me, that if they get to Dak Prescott in this game, I like the Lions' chances here. It's going to be a very, very, very close game here. It could be a 21-17 type of game. I'm picking the Lions here. They're going to barely beat the Cowboys here. This is going to be a back-and-forth game for sure. But I think the Lions are out for revenge. They're going to get their revenge against the Cowboys in this game. It's going to be a very close game. It's another 50-50 toss-up here. So it's going to be a very close game. But I like the Lions. They're a 3-point favorite in this one here. I'm going to take the 3 points. I'm going to take them at -3 to beat the Cowboys here, and the Lions over the Cowboys. All right, everybody, that wraps up my 4 key game picks for week number 6. Check the description below for all of my week 6 picks. And until then, everybody, I will see you guys next week when I make my picks for week number 7. Take care and enjoy your football weekend.